choice of either naming the student assistance team, or what we would call the student support team, or school personnel designated by the superintendent, to be deemed, if a student is determined to be truant, they have to be referred to such a team. Now, in our case, and in most districts I'm aware of, you don't wait until the student is already truant in order to make a referral like that. We would be working with a student and a family all the way along to try to determine what the issues are, what concerns may be preventing a student from regularly attending school, and then hopefully avoiding ever getting to a point of truancy. But when truancy happens by state law, this referral has to be made. One thing, just to clarify for folks who may not have been quite as deep in work around attendance before, there's a difference between chronic absenteeism and truancy. So chronic absenteeism is when a student misses 10% or more of school for any reason. Truancy is related to just unexcused absences. And the reason we make that distinction is because we've got plenty of research now that shows that chronic absenteeism, any kind of absenteeism, ends up having a negative impact on students' learning and their well-being, and is a predictor of longer-term negative outcomes. So students who miss a lot of school in kindergarten tend to have much lower literacy scores in the 3rd grade. Students with high chronic absenteeism in the 9th grade tend to have lower graduation rates, and then even longer term negative outcomes. So chronic absenteeism is bad in general, whether it's due to illness or family issues or whatever. But truancy has its own category, because that's when a student is missing school for unexcused reasons, and therefore it falls into this category of a legal problem that needs to be addressed. So you can see here the definition of truancy that sort of gets you to that place where action is required to be taken under the law. The other thing here that could be changed if we want to, and I would suggest we do, but this is, again, this is the model policy, but Drummond pointed out that the board doesn't need to be who appoints the attendance coordinators. That could be the superintendent or the superintendent's designee who makes that appointment. And I would suggest probably that we make that change here, since it's probably getting a little bit more in the weeds than the board would likely want to do. So that's one amendment I might suggest we make. And then where this bolded language is, I would suggest that the board either consider going with this sort of generic term of student assistance team, or adopting the more sort of formal language of student support team. And then that language would, whichever language we choose, would need to get repeated in these other locations. And yeah, those are some of the main things. Would it be helpful if I pull up the Redline version of our policy so you can see where the red comes in? Okay, give me 1 second here. Just get to the right version. Sorry, I had too many different versions open. Okay. All right. So I think they were sort of um, trying to steer us away from this just because it's messy. It's got a lot of red in it, and a lot of it is sort of words here and there, and formatting changes. But you can see the change in the age, and a little bit of the definition here. So when the truancy is the result of neglect by a person responsible for the child, comes into play. The child is at least 5 years of age and has been voluntarily enrolled in school, so at least 5 years of age. And then, so again, these are the definitions, right? It's clarifying and updating the definition of a truant student. So cutting out this language here around days of unexcused absences during a school year, and the definition being school days of unexcused absences, the truancy under this paragraph is considered child abuse and neglect. So that part is not different, but it warrants a report to DHHS. And then they changed this to board, but they told us it could remain as superintendent. And then this is that language where we have some choice around student assistance team or student support team. I'm not sure why they did all this number renumbering there. And then some relatively minor wording changes down here. The notice being either by hand or registered mail, but taking out this language around the superintendent being required to make 2 documented attempts to serve the notice by certified mail. So the procedure there changes. And my understanding of the removing legal guardians is that legally they regard the parent, legal guardian and parent are sort of interchangeable in the language that they use. These are updated references to the law. Take out the word habitual truancy because truancy itself is a problem. And again, mostly minor updates related to legal, the number of the law and the lettering here. And again, we need to insert either student assistance team, or we could choose to use student support team. And another place where we would need to insert that phrase that we choose to use. And aligning to the titles of other policies here. So those are the key red lines that would make our policy match their model policy. And actually, I think that our policy is very similar to what their old model policy was. So the changes that they note here are effectively would be taking us into line with the new model policy. So you as a committee can decide if you would like to adopt red lines or just take the new model policy and adopt that, as a whole, but it's effectively the same impact.
Thanks, Dr. Warren. Does anyone on the committee have any questions for Dr. Warren? I have some questions. I am wondering, I know you touched on both of these, but I just would like a little more clarification about why the lawyers suggested changing it from the superintendent will appoint to the board shall appoint, if they had any reasoning behind that. And then my second question was just about the removal of the term legal guardian. I don't understand how the word parent would encompass that.
hmm So hang on one second. Let me see if I can find the exact language from the lawyers about the board versus the superintendent. They don't explain why. They just say our sample policy originally said the board selects the attendance coordinator, but it can be the superintendent per statute.
Okay, so it was probably just that they were using the model policy as the example and that's the language. Okay.
Yeah. Um, I don't know why the board slipped into it because I mean, from my perspective, it would it seems a little bit too in the weeds for the board to be identifying who the coordinator is. It seems like that would normally be the purview of the superintendent, but I don't know how that slipped in when they were working on the model policy, but they, I think that's why they provided the clarification that the law allows for that to be the superintendent.
Okay, that makes sense. I would agree that it would be more appropriate for the superintendent, not the board, to have that role. So I'd be willing to make an amendment when we get to that point if and then we can see if others are in favor.
Okay. And sorry, you had a second question and I
Yeah, it
lost
was
it.
about the parent slash legal guardian, the removal of legal guardian.
I'm realizing that I made the assumption because I've had this conversation with them before, um, in other contexts that they regard the parent as equivalent. Sorry, the legal guardian and parent are effectively the same, and so um, they just think it's overly wordy to keep repeating both. So that's how it's been explained to me in the past. I didn't actually specifically ask about it in this instance. Um, and certainly if the committee would feel more comfortable, I can go back and, ask explicitly if I'm right that that's the same reason in this situation. You know, the board, or sorry, the committee could raise questions that I take back to Drummond and we could vote on this the next time. It doesn't have to be tonight necessarily.
Does anyone else have any questions for Dr. Warren? Okay. Dr. Warren, you did want us to vote on this tonight?
Um, I, only because it's one that's required by state law and, to bring us into alignment. But I also think that if the committee has questions and would like a little bit more clarification from the legal team, we can certainly do that.
Does anyone have any strong feelings about the legal guardian wording? It just doesn't sit right with me, but I haven't had those conversations like Dr. Warren has, so I'm curious what other people think.
Yeah, same. I think the legal guard, but I mean, I don't know what they're basing the language on. If there's like wording or language type of things, I guess in policy and law that states that parent and legal guardian are the same. So I don't know. I mean, legal guardian would make sense leaving it alone, but parent by itself just doesn't make sense.
Let me pull up the model policy, because certainly in the beginning, it refers to legal guardians. So if we were going to work from the model policy, hold on one second, let me put that up on
Okay.
the screen.
Charlene, do you want to say something while that's happening?
Yeah, I know that there are other policies where we use parent in lieu of legal guardian, and that's just been like the convention that we use in PPS. I agree that I wish it was the other way around, that we use legal guardian instead of parent, because it does feel more inclusive to me. So those are just my 2 cents.
Thank you.
All right, so let's look back at the model policy. So if you look at D, this contains the parents/legal guardians language. And then they take it out under 2.
I think I'd like more clarification on that, and with the like leaning towards having it be consistent throughout and favoring the inclusion of legal guardian.
I was just trying to think if there's some reason why I'm thinking about the records law. If there's any reason why the legal guardian wouldn't be automatically entitled to all of those records. I don't know what that would be. That's a pretty nuanced thing. So let me just check with the lawyers and we can bring this back the next time. Are there other questions we want to take to them?
I think that's it. Thank you, Dr. Warren.
Sure. E2. But I think that's actually a helpful question for, I mean, like I said, I remember having this conversation with our lead attorney at one point, and it was sort of a, like, you don't have to keep repeating that over and over, I think was the attitude, but, or the perspective. But let's get more clarity around it, and that might help us on other policies as well. Okay. Great. So are we ready to move on then to physical restraint and seclusion?
Yes, we are.
Okie dokie. Oops. Great. One day Zoom and I will make friends. Okay. Can you see that policy in front of you now?
Yes.
Okay. Great. So again, this is one that, is an existing policy. It is relatively small changes, but in the eyes of the law, important ones. These are things that have changed, and we just need to come into alignment with the most recent changes to the law. I think this has been deemed appropriate as a more of a grammatical change. But this is one of the significant changes here, based on the recent legal change, is that the word voluntary is removed, because there was a determination that this law should apply, that involuntary escorts of students are legal under certain circumstances. So the word voluntary is removed, in order to bring that clarification. A student may, in certain circumstances, be escorted even though they don't want to go somewhere. And then here, we just see a little bit of this just like formatting change around the timeout. But really what's most important here is this language around, and again, this is based on the change in the law, is slightly redefining what a serious physical injury is. And now instead of it saying that it's an impairment of the physical condition of a person, whether self-inflicted or inflicted on someone else, that is beyond the care of routine first aid, and if the injury had occurred, would require a medical practitioner to evaluate. So my understanding, based on the training I went to, is that that line was considered to be confusing and challenging for folks to figure out, this notion that it's beyond the care of routine first aid was both vague and I guess it's seen by some as extreme. So this definition now requires a medical practitioner, including but not limited to a school nurse, is meant to clarify that definition. So that is a required change. And here they use parent legal guardian. So apparently it's not a non-starter. Parent legal guardian who has a complaint concerning the implementation of the policy must submit it in writing to the superintendent as soon as possible. So that's just the addition of that language there. And then the responsibility of the superintendent or designee to investigate and provide findings, that part has not changed. It's just, I think, sort of flagging the responsibility of the parent or the legal guardian to make that complaint in writing and in a timely way. So those are the fundamental changes.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. Yes, board member Yusra Ali.
So at any school, there are trained individuals on how to properly carry out restraining a student, right?
Yeah, so we have been providing most recently CPI training. Crisis Prevention Institute is the organization that established this training, and there are different levels of training. The most basic training is about de-escalation procedures and ways to try to avoid a behavior escalating. But then people with a more intensive level of training actually learn how to ways that they can hold a student that keeps everybody safe, including the student, and tries to help calm them rather than triggering even more challenging behavior. But that is the goal is to not have to use those types of holds on a regular basis. This is, yeah. So, and the other thing to know is that there's a Chapter 33 report. So a special report has to be filed when there is a restraint carried out on a student. So just to emphasize how rare that ought to be, it does happen, and we do have to file the Chapter 33 reports, but that should be a last resort, essentially.
And oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so what they're doing here is making sure it's clear that some of these other things don't count as that, right? So it's not necessarily uncommon that a staff member may be trying to get a student to move down the hallway or move from one room to another or come back in from recess or something. And so escorting the student to a safe location is allowed, and it may not be that the student wants to go, but this is trying to make the point that even so, you can do these things in order to, kind of move a student along, and that's not considered a restraint.
And that's the involuntary like that's when like maybe restraining a student or touching a student, that's when that like the first point of looking at the physical escort. So the reason why we took off the voluntary means that there are situations where it is involuntary, but it has to happen. Okay.
Right. That's what the law, the change in the law is trying to clarify, is that it may not always be voluntary, but that doesn't mean that it's a restraint.
Okay. Thank you.
Vice Chair Bondo.
Thank you. I just had that question on that policy. So I mean, it's really referring to all students, right? Also the special education student, because I know for them they have a different restraint, or the way they restrain them physically or any other ways, or that policy is just applying for all our students.
Yeah. It applies across the board. And, we have to observe the law when it comes to our special ed students, as well. So, it may be that in certain situations, for some reason related to their disability, there might be, especially if there's a behavioral related challenge, and a related safety issue, that maybe there would be more situations where something like that would arise. But we, absolutely have to, follow the law with regard to restraint,
Okay.
whether the student's special ed or not.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Does anyone else in the committee or Chair Lenz have any questions? Dr. Warren, would you like us to possibly vote on this tonight?
I think if you're ready, this is probably one we could go ahead and pass through and move it on to the board if you're comfortable. But again, I've got a list here. So if there are questions that we want to take back to the lawyers, I can certainly do that, and we could bring it back next week or next time.
Could I possibly do a show of hands if you're willing to take this to a vote? I think board member Yusra Ali stepped away for a minute. Ali, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I didn't really catch that, guys. I was booted out for a little bit because of the internet, but if you can just give me what it's about from the top, like just real quick.
Yep, there are two key changes. One is removing the word voluntary, so that pointing out that a student may be physically escorted against their will. They may not want to go, but even so, in the process of escorting a student, potentially touching them, holding a wrist or an arm, touching the back, etc., that's still allowed, and not considered a restraint according to the new wording of the law. That's why they took out the word voluntary, just to clarify that the student doesn't have to be agreeing to go along if it is, a situation where you need to move them.
Yeah.
So that's one piece. And then the other, significant change, again, based on the change in the law, is the change in this definition of serious physical injury to clarify that it requires a medical practitioner, including but not limited to a school nurse. So pretty much aligned to the new law, not really things that we have much choice about.
So, but I would say requiring a medical practitioner, or including but not limited to. Okay, so they're not limited to, could be ambulance if they need to go to the hospital or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think my understanding is that people just found this prior language of beyond the care of routine first aid to be confusing. And so this was an attempt to make it a bit clearer.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's cool. I'll vote. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Okay, I would like to make a motion to accept the recommended changes of policy JKAA, physical restraint and seclusion. Do I have a second? Thank you, Vice Chair Bondo. Are there any questions from the committee on the motion? Is there any public comment? Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, then by roll call vote, please indicate whether you are in favor of adopting the changes to policy JKAA, physical restraint and seclusion. Board member Ali.
Yes.
Board member Yusra Ali.
Yes.
Vice Chair Mickey Bondo.
Yes.
And I am a yes, so that passes. Thank you, everybody.
Right. All right. So, sorry, if we're ready to move on, we'll go to, I can't seem to get this to the right size, BEDH. So again, this is public participation at board meetings. And the red lines here are mainly aimed at getting to just a clearer, simpler process. And this is based on guidance from our legal counsel that essentially our policy was more complicated than it needed to be. And that it would be totally within the bounds of the law and their model policy and the way other districts do things if we just had one public comment period and didn't require a separate vote, separate comment period before every vote. And so that is what this would accomplish. Is Chair Lentz still here? Did you want to speak to this, Chair Lentz?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to it a little bit. Also, if you are following the news at all, there are just a lot of challenging events happening at school board meetings all over Maine and elsewhere across the country. And we really just want to make sure that our policies are in alignment with the First Amendment as well. And so one, this simplifies things, but then also just like make sure that we're allowing all kinds of speech at our meetings and to give us guidelines on what we can kind of shut down. So this clarifies that, I think, in some good ways.
Right, so this is section two, under B, so 1B, you can see just a shift in some of the language around the requirements or the guidance for the expectations, I should say, for the speakers.
And I do want to just note, like, there's some identity language that goes away, but it's still included in the language. Like anything that is obscene or defamatory can be shut down.
So I think on this one, Chair Lena, that again, up to the committee to decide whether there are further questions or need for more discussion. If not, then it could be voted on and moved on to the full board. I think that's at the discretion of the committee.
Yes, and I'm sorry if I missed this. I had to step away for a moment. I'm just wondering about the part that touches on the general public comment versus the voting public comment. Is that something that was recommended to us, or is that something that we've sort of felt like it's better practice to have the opportunity early on for people?
So the mindset I think that that I inherited, and Mickey, I would love to have any background that you have, is that we put public comment at the beginning. Other places do it other ways, but for families that are coming to give public comment, we don't want them to have to wait through you know, a bulk of a business meeting before giving that public comment. And we've seen it, you know, in the last year, if we have a more charged issue that's an hour and a half into the meeting, that we have a great number of people that have to wait for that. So this would just give us the option to let people, and it's also like hard as chair to, if somebody gives up to give comment and they're talking about something that's on the agenda later, like I hate having to be like, oh, you can't talk about that now. You need to sit back down and come back up in an hour. So I would like to eliminating that it would be great. I think the downside that I see to this is, you know, sometimes it's helpful as a board member to hear comments right as an issue is being talked about. But I think we might actually get more comments about issues if people know that they're going to just be in a general comment period as opposed to having to wait for the issues to come up in the meeting. Does that answer your question?
Yep, board member Yusra Ali.
So when we're having issues that we are voting on, so there'll be two public comments, one at the beginning of the meeting that can be anything in addition to what will be discussed, and then that same person can come up later to discuss what's on the agenda, or no? Okay.
So these changes will say that there's a one public comment period. And the board chair decides when that falls in the agenda. Right now, that falls at the beginning of the agenda. So that would be when all public comment would happen. What would be removed is like when we get to policies and I say, is there, you know, a motion? Is there a second? Is there any questions? Is there any public comment? That public comment would go away.
Chairlins, what about the question of if someone has multiple topics they want to give public comment on, could they make two separate public comments during that general public comment period?
Yes, I would. I think that would be the discretion of the chair, but I would generally allow that.
Okay, great. Yes, Vice Chair Bondo.
Yes, I just want to make sure that the public comment, because we still have a different public comment during the budget. So I just want to make sure if we stay the same or is going to be under the new policies, it may change because sometimes we talk about the budget and then we ask about feedback, or sometimes we talk before the budget and then we ask again some feedback to the public. So I've been seeing a lot of people, we've been asking them a lot of comments before the budget, and then after the budget, they have a lot to say, but they cannot allow to speak anymore. So what we do, I'm so sorry, what we do between that? Or everything is going to be in regard to the chair to see for the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I think we will.
Or include it.
We're mandated to have the budget forums, which allow for public comment on the budget. So that legally we have to do. I know, I remember the meetings that you're talking about where we have like all public comment that's not on the budget, and then here's the presentation on the budget, and then there'd be a public comment session afterwards. I think that even given this, like as chair, you can add more public comment if you want, but this would be the baseline. You know, I think in spirit of transparency and community, like having that second just, you know, and we could even, actually, now that I'm talking this out, I think I'd probably do, you know, if people needed to leave, they could do their public comment first and then again after the budget.
Board member Ali.
Yeah, I have a problem with this specifically because in the state they have like different whenever we have to present in front of a committee or anything, they have to present everything. There are public comments before the like the vote or the, you know, during the discussion, and that actually helps like figure out more information, right? So I think that by taking this out, like say public comments are only in the beginning, but to like I don't really see a lot of people really commenting much when you say when there's a public comment opening about the specific policy or whatever we're discussing. It just kind of helps, I guess, break out the information at the same time, have the community be able to understand what we're discussing, and then put public comment in. So I don't know. I think this for me it's yeah, I'm probably going to be in disagreement with it.
I think that's a great point, that it can help with the, you know, give the public a chance to hear what the presentation is or what the discussion is among board members, and then they can share their thoughts. So it is a bit more inclusive, but I also see the side of, you know, needing to wait an hour and a half or 2 hours. I'm not sure when that opportunity is going to be. It is a big time commitment, for the public to commit that, to come join a board meeting. We do allow public comment over Zoom, which is something that our city council does not allow. So it does give people that flexibility to, you know, be watching from home and taking care of family and then chiming in when their topic comes up. It is still, you know, disruptive and you have to pay attention for that period. But thank you for raising that, Ali. Any other thoughts on this matter? I don't know if we're ready to vote on this one. I'm not sure. Does anyone else want to share their thoughts about whether or not we're ready to pass these changes, or if we need more discussion or some amendments? Yes, Board Member Yusra Ali.
I think I agree with what Alice said, and also the fact that I was going to say we do have Zoom for the people who cannot make it in the room. And so I think that kind of breaks up the discussion. I know these meetings can be really long and the information can be too much. So it gives people a little bit of time to digest a little bit of information and then ask questions or state their concerns. So I probably would not also be in favor or ready to vote without any amendments.
Board Chair Lenz, was it possible to have both options? You know, if people want to stay and listen
I
and
mean,
then
we
offer
would just
comment?
we would just revert to the previous language.
But can't you not presently, you cannot speak during general public comment about agenda items?
I mean, yes, but the board, it's again the board chair's discretion. If people need to, I usually allow it, but we could formalize that policy and say you can speak during the beginning or you can speak during the comment period when the vote happens.
Dr. Warren, do you see any downside to offering that option?
No, I mean, I think the main downsides are just one, just maybe a little bit less clear, but also the length of the meetings. I was trying to think about how often do we have people who stay to speak, you know, when the vote is happening. I feel like it's not all that often, except when there's a really, you know, big issue where people feel like they're determined they're going to be heard because it's that important to them. But I feel like we've also heard quite a few complaints that people are annoyed that they have to wait to speak to it until the vote happens. So I don't know. I'm just speaking from, you know, what I feel like I've heard in the room. I don't know that there's a legal problem with doing that.
Yes, Vice Chair Bondo.
Yeah, I'm kind of a little comfortable for me to go and vote for this because I feel like if the chair has the flexibility to see the volume, because we see the length and some of those intervention between policies or votes, we don't have a lot of people giving the comments, but if we have some flexibility from the chair by see the agenda and the importance of the theme of the subject of the day and see them we have a full room, they can adjust those public comments. If we do have, if the chair has the flexibility, adjust allowing the public comments, then we know
You
that
you cut you're cutting out, Mickey.
the possible and 1,000 people and some people they know say longer to wait till them to
Mickey.
and that's why we took the bid in the first place. So we respect that. So they can have a time to speak and maybe leave
Vice Chair
enforce
Bondo,
more
Vice Chair Bondo, we can't hear you at
on
all.
internet. Sorry.
Vice Chair, we can't hear you at all. Your internet is breaking. Your sound is very choppy.
I think what Vice Chair Bondo was saying is that she feels that if the chair has the discretion, then that is enough to, make a decision at the moment of the meeting. I believe that's what she was saying. And yes, Board Member Ali, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. I mean, exactly. I think the chair having the discretion if things are am I so okay, let me rephrase. In the beginning, there is public comment, and they can pretty much bring up anything, any issues that they do see, or if there's a policy that's going to come up, if they need the time. That's actually like a really nice thing compared to other ones that I've seen that you have to wait for the policy to be talked about usually. So having that opening in the beginning does give people opportunity if they cannot stay. And then like right when we talked about the policy and then having public comment, it just gives it gives yeah, it just gives it juice. Like if there's anything we were missing, right? So I just don't want to miss that. And if there's say something in a specific line or a specific during the policy, right? And someone explains that in the beginning of it, there's a specific line. I'm probably not going to remember by the time we get to the policy, right? So because of the structure, and like Mickey said, the discretion of the chair is vital in all this to regulate. Like, no, we're not talking about that. We're talking about this and whatnot, and emergencies and whatnot.
I wonder if it would be worth considering adding a phrase that makes explicit the discretion of the chair to add a public comment period if needed or something. Would that help?
I was just looking at the document on my own screen over here just to see if there was anything that explicitly said that public comment will not be taken during the discussion, and I don't see anything to that end, which is helpful because it means that it's not prohibited.
And this version takes out that language around early in the agenda, which gives more flexibility around when public comment happens, which would be helpful too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to read through to see if there's anything that would be prohibitive. It does say the time limits in this paragraph may be modified at a particular meeting at the discretion of the board chair. I mean, that's specifically about how long someone can speak. So I'm just wondering if it's necessary to have anything about the chair having the discretion to allow public comment at other times. But I think what Dr. Warren said, it doesn't say anything specifically about when the comment is happening.
Yeah, we can split
Hold
chair
on
or
one second,
co-chair.
one
Oh,
second,
sorry.
Ali. Chair Lens has her hand up.
Yeah, I would just say, kind of like in the duties of the chair, I think there's a policy on this. I can't remember the name of it. But it is like one of the primary responsibilities of the chair is to make the agenda for the board meetings. And that's the umbrella term that it uses in the language. So there is like full discretion baked in. I think like one thing we can think about is just like, this is the board makeup that we have right now. Like if the board was to radically change in some way, like, and you get a board chair who, is not as open to public comment, like this could be, you just want to like think about that. Like, what is the language in that situation that you want to have in this policy? But I think like the board chair always has discretion for the meetings over anybody else in the room.
And Chair Lance, I just
you.
noticed this
Yeah.
paragraph that seems, I'm surprised that got left in. Sorry. It seems like it's maybe an oversight by the lawyers that this should have come out as well. Excuse me.
Yeah, thanks for catching that.
I'm sorry, I'm just gonna get some water.
Sure. Chair Lens, do you know that if we need to take this out, I mean, I guess we could do an amendment, or should we? I guess my question is, how are you feeling about the state of the red lines? Is it something that we could vote on tonight, or do we need a little more tweaking?
I mean, I feel comfortable with removing additional public comment from voting, but if this committee does not, then that is your prerogative. I do think that there needs to be an amendment if that is left in, that we're removing it, that highlighted paragraph should also be removed, because then it doesn't make any sense if it's still in there. But I feel comfortable removing it.
Okay. Yes, Ali.
Yeah, so question, during the public comment period prior to the board voting on an agenda item at regular school board meetings, members of the public wishing to speak must limit their comments to agenda items being considered. Is that, so why are we removing that? Because that's pretty much what that part of the comment section or the public, is assigned to, or is there.
So, I was highlighting that as something that would need to be removed if the committee did in fact approve this other change in language above, because that would then be inconsistent with
Oh,
this.
okay. Okay.
But if this language doesn't get changed, then that paragraph would stay.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out though if it could still work to have both, because I recognize that we're taking out the part about waiting until the agenda item comes up, but it wouldn't be exclusive of it. It's basically saying that if you are speaking on an agenda item, that's the only thing that you can speak about at that time. So like if we're talking about the calendar, for example, and the calendar comes up, an hour and a half into the meeting, and then someone comes up and they want to start talking about class sizes, they can't do that. If the chair is allowing the public to comment on the calendar thing, someone can't come in and start talking about something that's not on the topic. So it might make sense to leave it in there.
I think you would probably just want to make an amendment that says, should the board allow public comment prior to voting, then, but like, because right now it reads that there is a public comment period prior to board voting. And I think that's what you're trying to eliminate.
Yes, Ali.
Yeah, so I do see a difference now between the legislative and ours. We make it public, open to public comment towards the end before voting. They make public comment the first when they start discussing the issue at hand. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're ready. I don't know. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, Dr. Ryan, if we remove the number 2 before each vote, the other paragraph should be removed because it's not aligning. That's what you said, right? That's what you meant?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it looked like maybe an oversight that the lawyers didn't strike this language. I could be wrong. I wasn't really going back and forth with them on this one. But that's how it reads to me, is that it's inconsistent to leave that in if this other language is taken out.
Okay, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Yeah, it's becoming a little more complicated right now because if we feel like we have to give them some options to speak when we have a policy. And I think if it's that one, and I'm just going back then, if the chair can have that flexibility, I'm totally fine to move this forward.
Mm.
Yeah, I think we just need to have an amendment where we can see, because we're gonna have a different chairs. So making sure that we are aligning policies, then the flexibility in from the chair to move some of those public comments when we have a fully agenda and we know then people's going to comment on those specific items in those agendas. So the amendment can be there so we can move forward.
I think I'm leaning towards like my feeling is that I fully understand why we would like to offer public comment on agenda items at the beginning for the convenience of the people that are commenting, but I also really do not want to eliminate the opportunity for the public to comment after hearing the discussion of the board, because sometimes, you know, your opinion may change after you hear new information. And so I know we're saying that the chair can have the discretion, but the chair could be anyone 5 years from now. We don't know what their style will be, and I just am concerned about removing that as an option, as a practice, I think. So I think I'd like a little bit more time, maybe some, you know, having the lawyers look at that piece again. I see Ali is saying that he agrees with me in the chat.
Chair, can I ask, I understand what you're saying on that part. I'm just wondering if the committee has any feedback or questions regarding the other piece here, just so we have a sense of whether there are other things we might need to get more input on from the lawyers.
I don't. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share about that section?
I want to ask Sarah if like what was the reason why this was brought up? If that's yeah.
Yeah, so again, like we have seen across the state of Maine, the public comment that is being challenged in a lot of ways. And I think it's incredibly important right now that we have a public comment guideline that upholds the First Amendment and makes sure that people can, you know, speak their minds, but that if it becomes derogatory in any fashion, if it becomes disruptive, that the board has, or the chair has the authority to shut it down. And by kind of like in the previous language, by naming some things, it is then it it shuts off the ability to shut down other things. And so by creating a little bit of a broader policy, you still can shut down all the things, but it's not also perceived as you're only going to shut down things when they are disparaging X, Y, or Z identity. That's inclusive of this language, but it's not just like targeted at that language, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I don't see the correlation of the removing the comment section for the the issue at so I don't that's why I'm pushing back on that. I understand exactly where you're coming from, and I see, and if we have to make the chairs discretion a little stronger, but I think it's strong enough. But if we have to make it stronger, then it's fine. But when something is happening, you're like, we're like, we don't want to hear that. We don't want to deal with that. That's like a little much, yeah, you should just turn it off. Like it's not happening,
Right. And I think that that's like the, so we revisited this policy maybe 2 years ago, Dr. Warren. I don't remember if you were here when we did this, but it was right after the pandemic, and
Yes.
there had been a lot of like Zoom bombers that were
Yes.
happening, and they were coming in and doing like a lot of very specific hate towards specific groups of people. And so that is why a lot of these things were listed in this policy. And those things are still protected here, but it gives even larger authority to shut down anything that is disruptive. And it also then cannot be perceived that this board is only shutting down things that have to do with identity. Does that give any more clarity?
It kind of does a little bit. I think it kind of, if we have to put into the language about the identity piece, like we can, not an agenda, into the policy to put in the identity piece, then we should. But yeah, it's just I know that this is the First Amendment, like personally, but anything discriminatory, anything calling people out, any name calling, like it's just not, we're not gonna put up with that, you know what I'm saying? But for people to just like regularly speak their mind based on what they're thinking about certain things, yeah.
So I can't tell from what you're saying now, Board Member Ali, if you are in favor of what is here or if you're suggesting something different.
I'm just trying to understand why, like, what would this change? So, like, how would this change? Okay, the first part I agree with, then, but the only thing I guess I wouldn't agree with is the removal of the other public comments when talking about specific policies at hand. That's the only thing I would not take out. So if you're trying to change the discretion of the chair, I agree with that. I'll agree with that. So there was two parts that I just didn't understand. So the first one I could agree with. The second one, I'm going to push back on that one. That's what
I just want to be mindful of the time. It's 7:20 and we have other meetings starting at 7:30, and we have not had a chance to talk about class size. So, Dr. Warren.
Chair Maya,
Yes,
I just want to excuse myself. I'm not feeling well at all. So I did my best, but I just want to leave and take care of myself right now. All right.
Thank you so much, Vice
All right.
Chair Bondo. Feel better.
Better.
I know we were hoping to move this through, but I think there are still some questions just about that that piece with the public comment in terms of the general versus the agenda items. Yes, Chair Lins.
Yeah, I would just maybe recommend that people come with prepared amendments, because I think you can talk about things, but sometimes it might be a little bit more efficient to just like try to vote on it and then see what the conversation is, put an amendment through, and if it fails, then you get clarity pretty quickly on what might stick or not. So I would just
You mean
recommend
right
that
now or for the next?
for the
No.
next one. Yeah,
okay,
for the next
sure.
one. Yeah, because I know you're out of time, but
Yeah.
also to just, yeah, let people know what your amendments are going to be
Yep.
beforehand.
And
Wait,
then Dr. Warren, if
so
you could get some clarity on that piece about the the agenda time and the general public comment, if they're in conflict with each other, if there's some rewording we could do, that would, I know that that's not what Geraldine is saying, but maybe you and I can check in about that. Did you have your hand up still, Geraldine's, or are you? Oh, no. Okay. Yes, Dr. Warren.
No, I just want to make sure I was clear. You're talking about this paragraph here that I highlighted.
Yes. Yeah, I know we talked about, the Ali and I were both saying that we felt like it was important to keep the option to have public comment at the time of voting, but making sure that the way it's worded is not in conflict. And I can come with an amendment that clarifies that if that's helpful, or if you are speaking with the lawyers, you and I could check in about that.
Okay.
Do we have, maybe just like 2 minutes? We could talk quickly about class size.
Yeah. So maybe what I can do is just go back to the deck for a minute. So let me just put forward an idea, a thought for the committee maybe to consider, which is, I mean, this is a fairly big issue. It's complex. It's not one of the simple ones, right? This is not a wording change. This would have significant implications in all directions, right? So I would love to encourage the committee to to get directly involved in exploring the research on this one. And at the same time, I have started, reached out to the data team, to Haley, to see if we can get for our end of November meeting, I think it's on November 24th, to get some of the data that would be coming out of, the most recent student count from October, so that we could look at what our current class size makeup looks like across the district. We could also probably look back at last year and maybe get a little bit more, I don't know, I was thinking about this, how much we might be able to get in the way of class size information related to outcomes for students. That gets tricky because you can't necessarily say that there's a relationship between class size and outcomes. We don't have a research study to prove it, but anyway, I would be interested to know if the committee has any particular data, aside from just sort of hear what the class sizes look like at our schools across grades and whatnot, which is what I will get from the data team. Are there other particular aspects of the data you would like to be looking at that we could be working on?
One thing I just thought of is space, physical space. If a particular elementary school regularly has, 4 fourth grade classes, if there were to be a new policy that reduced the class sizes and they needed to have 5, is that possible? So that would be a question that I would have.
That gets back to the whole boundaries committee
Yeah.
study. Yeah.
Yes, Yusra Ali.
Also, if it's possible to get some kind of data on neighboring school districts and their outcomes, just to compare, that would be great.
Yeah, I don't know. We can take a look, and I just want to draw your attention back again to, these are just 3 other districts not too far away from us that have a policy. I didn't spend a lot of time meditating on them, but I was interested to see that they were they had policies, but they weren't putting a really strong stake in the ground. They were sort of more like, here's what we hope to do, and but there's discretion within this, and we know we have to balance out our numbers with the budget and everything. So it didn't strike me as being that far from where we are right now. It's just that they put it in writing. So I don't know how helpful it will be, but at least you can see what some of the other districts around us in Southern Maine or Central Maine are doing.
Yeah, that's in the slide deck, and I can just take those and email those to the committee so that's more like in your email. Yusra, did you have a follow-up question, or are you all done?
Yes, this is like a general question. Will we be looking specifically at elementary, middle, or high school, or are we just looking at everybody?
It's a great
good
question. That's a good question.
I know that when Dr. Opperman had tried to start this conversation last year in this committee, she had ended up kind of moving in the direction of talking about elementary and particularly early elementary. I think because of some of the research around, the value of class sizes being smaller in those grades, and the sort of social emotional benefit, but also the focus on literacy in those early grades. But I think that this committee needs to make that determination about, would you be looking at all of it, or do you want to focus on a particular area?
I will be doing some research on my own and kind of coming up with, I don't know, what I would like to see. I feel like this topic is very big and complex, especially with how we are, the budget is very tight for us. And so I feel like this conversation needs to be really carefully discussed.
Chairlins. Last
Um,
question from Chairlins.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to pull together the PowerPoints and research that's been pulled the last couple of years from board docs and just send it to this committee so you can have a place to start. And then I really do think that it would be helpful to get some financial information about this at the beginning of the conversation. I just don't want us to get to a model policy and then figure out that there's no way that we can afford it. So I'm not sure how Dr. Warren, you want to approach that, but it does feel like having at least some information up front feels important.
Yeah, I think I can talk to Dr. Scallon about that I think to get some thoughts from him about how we might be able to organize that.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. I would like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do we have a second? Thank you, Board Member Ali. Ali, all in favor, show of hands. Okay, great. We are adjourned at 7:29 p.m. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.